I worked at a mall when I was 19 or 20 and would often work late even after the store closed, on displays and whatnot. Sometimes I wouldn't get out until midnight. I always try to park near coworkers so that we can all walk out together. But I had arrived that day when it was very busy and the only parking was way out in the back. There had been a guy in the store earlier that evening that was kind of creepy, just hanging around watching me and the other cashiers, and didn't buy anything. So that night, as I was walking towards my car, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around and I realized it's him. He seemed like he was walking towards me, but I tried to reason that perhaps he had parked in the same area. I knew that I should probably pull out my phone and call someone, stay on until I was safe in my car. But I sort of froze up, and before I could reach my phone, he was behind me and grabbed me by the elbow, spun me around to face him. They always talk about fight or flight response, but leave out freeze, which is what happened to me. I just felt like a deer in headlights. It all happened so fast, but felt slow at the same time. It's true what they say about how it feels like time slows down in certain situations. He didn't say anything at first, but he was close enough that I could smell his clothes reeked of stale cigarette smoke, and his eyes were bloodshot, and he was kind of dead eyes. I honestly almost pissed myself. All these thoughts came to mind. I'm gonna be raped, kidnapped, murdered. And then, all of a sudden, I hear someone's voice. A security guard who was doing rounds outside came around the corner. It was only like 10 seconds before he came, but like I said, it also felt like it took forever. He shouts something. I still can't recall what, and the dude takes off. A security guard comes over to me, asking if I'm okay, etc. I asked him if the next day it might be possible to find a creep on the store security tapes and put up some notice for security to not let him in or something. He hadn't actually done anything to me, so it's not like I could call the police. He stayed with me until my husband came to pick me up. I was still in shock for quite a while. I already have PTSD before this, so I totally shut down and couldn't absorb what happened. But what really scared me, I hadn't noticed this, but I heard the security guard tell my husband that the guy had a pocket knife out. I just didn't see it. What was he gonna do with that? After already struggling with PTSD, I had to take a break from work. It was hard to let go of the what ifs, and even now it's crazy to think I was so close, probably, to real harm. It's been several years and I still can't walk alone at night though. In my 20s, I used to deep clean a Burger King between 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. while it was closed. After my shift, I either head north and stop at Circle K on my way to another job, or head west to an Exxon to grab a cup of coffee to help me keep up so I could regulate my schedule. I'll call this clerk working at Circle K Alice. Alice was in her early 20s, very pleasant, and knew I was a regular at 4 a.m. She'd put down whatever she was doing and take a smoke break with me. Our conversations were mostly about movies and TV, occasionally crazy night shift stories, but rarely personal. It was a nice break after being alone all night. Now, on days that I couldn't go to my other job, I'd head to Exxon on my way home, where the clerk, whom I call Bob, would also stop what he was doing and join me for an early morning smoke. Bob was in his mid-20s, and we would talk mostly about sports and music. Now and then, his buddies would be there as well. It passed the time before the sun would rise, and people would be out and about. One night, I finished my Burger King job early and headed to the Circle K to chit-chat with Alice before my other job. As I was coming up to the gas station, I saw the parking lot roped off in yellow tape and several police cars in a lot. My heart sank as I headed to work. Later on that morning, I heard it on the news. It was awful. Alice had been murdered. She was shot in the back of her head. The murderer emptied a register and took the surveillance tapes that were recording at the time, and left her in the back office. Police had no leads. After my shift that following night, I headed over to Exxon before going home. Bob asked me if I heard the news about the Circle K clerk. We were both in shock that something like that took place in our sleepy southern town. We discussed how we would deal with an intruder if our stores were attacked. It makes you take a step back and realize how quick it can all end. The Circle K was up and running a day after the murder. Things were starting to become complacent again in a short manner of time. For a couple of weeks, there was no leads. I'm sure I was recorded on earlier surveillance tapes, so I was waiting to get called, but never did. Even though I stopped going to Circle K, I'd still visit Bob at Exxon and we'd carry on as usual. About a month later, the news reported that they had found the murderer. They had a shot of 3 guys in handcuffs against the back of the police cruiser. One by one, they showed their faces. The first one looked familiar, but couldn't recognize him. The second one appeared and I couldn't place him either. That's when I saw the third guy. My jaw dropped. How could it be? And there he was on my TV screen. Bob. All this time had passed, and I was alone with this guy discussing this murder for weeks, and this motherfucker did it. Man, I was duped. Bob confessed to the police. It turns out that Bob and Alice had been dating when she called it off because he didn't give her space. On his days off, he'd sit in a Circle K parking lot watching her, and if he was working, one of his buddies did it for him. As I suspected, I wasn't the only one she'd have a smoke break with. There were other customers who enjoyed chatting with her. Bob lost it one night after one of these smoke breaks and killed her. His buddies were the lookouts. He got caught by showing off the recordings of the surveillance camera and telling people that he made a movie and how realistic the murder looked. In the end, they all had their day in court, the details revealed, and each of them went to prison. Bob was placed in death row and eventually executed. I was driving Uber in 2018. It was the night of 4th of July in Atlanta, Georgia. So basically nothing but a bunch of drunk party people. Not that I couldn't handle that. But then I get this one ride that takes me about an hour's drive outside the perimeter of Atlanta. Usually I would turn the app off after I finished long rides that would take me outside the perimeter and turn it on when I get back into the city. But it was the 4th of July, so I was like, fuck it, why not? I got a ride from this apartment complex. At first I was having a hard time finding where the rider was, so I called them. A woman picks up, but I hear the other drunk person talking in the background. She tells me where they are and I find them no problem. It's 2 people, who I can only assume were either a couple or family. The man gets in first and is really quiet. The woman gets in second and me and her have a light conversation over some jazz music. Their trip was about 45 minutes in the opposite direction of the city, so in my mind I was like, perfect, I'm about to be in the boonies. There's silence in the car for about 5 minutes. Then the man starts whispering to the woman. I pay them no mind because I'm jamming out to my jazz music. Then I heard the woman audibly whisper, no, but in a yelling tone a few times. That's when my attention was caught. Then the man says to me, I don't like this music. Can you play something else? This should have been an immediate red flag because who the hell doesn't like jazz? But I go, my bad. What would you like to hear? This fat, drunk, middle-aged white man looks at me through the rearview mirror and says, why don't you play some rap? Now, just so you know, I'm black. Also, I usually give people the shadow of a doubt in my car when driving them around and what music they like to listen to. So I wasn't judging him, but I definitely became skeptical at this point. So you all know the story only gets worse from here. At this point, I can tell this man is very drunk by how he smelled and how he was talking. So I obliged him and turned the radio to some generic hip-hop station. A couple minutes go by and he says, I don't like this kind of rap. Got anything else? I say to him, the only rap music I have is on my phone, but I must warn you it's uncensored. Is that okay? He goes, yeah, sure, play it. So I started setting up my phone's MP3. Meanwhile, the middle-aged white woman who's also riding with us is completely silent now. So I put on Kendrick's Untitled Unmastered. It was like the second track on the album. The song plays out and there's a confusing silence in the car. I thought maybe he'd ask who this was or what song it was, but nothing, just silence as the song played. Near the end of the song, the lyrics says profanities, and simultaneously the couple begins to argue about something, but I couldn't hear because of the volume of the music. Before the song ends, this man puts his hand on my shoulder while I'm driving and says something mostly incomprehensible because of his thick accent and how bad he was slurring his words. Speaking of slurs, in that incomprehensible sentence, I made out that he was calling me a racial slur because I listened to quote-unquote N-word music. I immediately stopped the car and put my left hand on a hidden machete under the seat, since we're not allowed to carry guns. I told him that what he said was disrespectful and that I could kick them out in the middle of nowhere. But I needed money, so I was hoping they wouldn't call my bluff. All I asked was for an apology. He acted nonchalant about the event, so he called my bluff. The woman was still silent. I was annoyed mainly because there was only 15 minutes left in the trip and because I knew I needed the money, so I continued driving. The car is completely silent for about 10 minutes. Then, when we were about 8 minutes away from their destination, the man began to direct me every turn, even though the GPS was telling me where to go before he did. Some of it he gets wrong. The woman is again still silent. We're about less than a minute away from their destination, which is a suburb west of Atlanta. I came to the stop sign, and in front of me are old railroad tracks, and beyond that is darkness, but in the darkness I could make out a large tree. The GPS says make a left. The man says nah, continue straight. In that instance, the woman who was silent for most of the ride exclaims, no, don't go that way, don't listen to him. To which the man responds, I was just kidding. I have no doubt in my mind that the woman knew what would happen if I listened to him and continued straight. All of a sudden, I remembered all of the horror stories about lynchings from my mom's childhood, and my fight or flight mode was engaged. We arrived at their house, this suburban McMansion mess of a house. She gets out of the car and directs the man, come on. She gets out and starts walking to their house. At this moment, my heart is about to explode out of my chest from the adrenaline. My left hand is firmly grasping my hidden machete, and the man stumbles out of the car. Before he's completely out, he leans in, holds out his fist and says, we cool? Trying to fist bump me. I remain silent, ready for whatever bullshit he might try, ready to defend myself if I had to. I replied with a firm no. He finally gets out and slams the car door. I end the trip and bolt out of there in my mom's Jeep Patriot. She was letting me borrow her car to save up for my own. I turned the app off because I decided that was enough trips for the night. When I got home, I saw the profile was under the woman's name. I gave her 5 stars for basically being a mediator when I needed it the most, but that man deserves fucking -1,000 stars and should be banned from all ride-sharing apps.